Kia ora tātou, nau mai, haere mai, and welcome to our Committee of Council for Palmerston City Council on Tuesday the 10th of May 2022. I'm the chair for this morning's session, Mayor Grant Smith, and obviously the hearings are to hear submitters around our annual plan and budget process. Just want to explain a little bit of housekeeping. The meeting's being recorded and will be live streamed on our council's YouTube channel. Just in terms of health and safety for members of the public, councillors and staff will be quite aware, but the exits are signposted there, and the evacuation route in the unlikely event of an emergency is out to the clock tower in the square Te Marae o Hine. The assembly area, please follow our committee administrators. Obviously with health and safety, smoking, this is a non-smoking facility. Again, unlike the event of the use of a defibrillator, that is located in the front of house on the ground floor. Any issues or incidents, please report those to our committee administrators. We are obviously here following the COVID-19 protocols, so please follow those. Could I just ask all online participants just to keep their cameras turned on, but microphones muted, please, unless you're addressing the meeting. Councillors in person, we will use the our electronic device to get into the question queue as normal. Please do use that. And for our online councillors, Councillor Bowen and Councillor Johnson, you know the procedure. If you could just put your electronic hand up for questions as well. Right, we'll go through to our order of business. And the first one is around apologies. The committee resolves that the apologies be received from Councillors Naylor and Councillors Dennison. I'll look to move that, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Any questions or comments to that? There being none. We'll do this with a show of hands. We'll just wait for the screen to come up. And all those in favour? Against? And that is carried. And we also have Councillor Girard online as well. Number 2 in our order paper here is around additional items. I haven't received any. Around declarations of interest. Again, nobody's commented or sent me any. We'll move on to number 4, which is around the confirmations of the minutes. So we confirm the minutes that committee resolves that the minutes of the Committee of Council meeting, the 23rd of June 2021, Part 1, public, be confirmed as a true and correct record. I'm happy to move those, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Are there any matters arising to those? There being none, we'll do this with a show of hands again. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously, thank you. Right, we've got a second part of minutes to confirm as well. And this is around the committee resolving that the minutes of the Extraordinary Committee of Council meeting of the 2nd of March 2022, Part 1 public, be confirmed as a true and correct record. Again, I'll look to move those, seconded by Deputy Mayor. And are there any matters arising? There being none, we'll do this with a show of hands again. All those in favour? Against? And that's carried unanimously. Right, just a little bit of procedure stuff here. We do need to move the appointment of chairs for the following sessions. It's always been a policy of this council to share the chairing of hearings. It's a good practice to continue. So I will look to move that the committee resolves that the chairs of the remaining sessions be agreed as follows. For later today, 3:30 to 5:30 will be Councillor Hancock. For the evening session, 7 to 9 p.m. will be Councillor Butt. On Thursday at 9 a.m. will be Councillor Naylor. The afternoon session, 3:30 to 5:30, will be Councillor Petrinas. The evening session on Thursday, 7 to 9 p.m, will be Councillor Dingwell. And on Friday, the afternoon session, 3:30 to 5:30, will be the Deputy Mayor. I'll look to move those. Could I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Harpiter. Are there any comments to those? There being none, we'll wait for the screen. We'll vote, please. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. One final thing we need to go through too is the extension of our meeting time, because it extends over several days. So we need to move that the committee resolves, as per the standing orders 2.1.7, that the meeting be extended until 6 p.m. on Friday, the 13th of May 2022. I'll look to move that, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Are there any comments to that? There being none, we'll do it with a show of hands. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you. Now we need to resolve that we are hearing the submissions, and this is a hearing of submissions for our draft annual budget 22-23, and there are two parts to this. So the committee resolves that the Committee of Council receives the submissions on the draft annual budget 2022-23 and hear from presenters who indicated their wish to be heard in support of their submission. Number two, that the committee note the procedure for hearing of submissions as described in the procedure sheet. So look, I'll look to move that, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Are there any comments to that? There being none, we will do with a vote with a show of hands. All those in favour? Against? That is carried unanimously. Right, councillors, we're now into the business part of it, and it's around referring to the submitters in our procedure sheet. There's hard copies that you've got, and you've all been sent these in advance of the meeting, and I'll take it that everyone has read them. To our submitters online and in the chamber, your time is 10 minutes for your submission. Please, we've read your submission. You may want to summarise the key points there, but do allow some time for questions, because there is likely to be questions from councillors either in the chamber or online. We will ask you to come up to the council table there, and if you have a submission or a PowerPoint, then please get that to our committee administrators. Councillors will manage the questions, obviously, through the speaker queue. All right, we will now go to our first submitter. So on our list, is Anise here? No, I didn't think so. Okay. Mr. Perry, I know you're here. Welcome. Are you okay to come up first? Thank you. So, councillors, we're just adjusting the schedule. We have Mr. Paul Perry. That's submission 1:30. Welcome, Mr. Perry, and I understand you've got a small PowerPoint as well. Yes. Thank you. We'll just get that up for you, just one moment.
I'm not quite sure to get to that yet, but thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Sorry, Mr. Perry, could you just push the microphone?
Okay,
Gotcha.
Green light on. How's that? Okay, I appreciate the opportunity to speak and to submit. Local democracy is something that's very much appreciated in this day and age. And I want to just state that Palmerston North is a very good place to live, as you all know, and I've been here over 40 years. I'd also like to add, I am not the least bit troubled by the planter boxes. Okay. I've looked at a very substantial proportion of the amazing number of 340 submissions. Clearly, you have a tiger by the tail. There's a lot of unhappy people out there, a lot of angry people. I hope that it's clear to all counselors by now that at the very least that tiger would be a bit less grumpy if you had moved to capital value rating years ago and joined the 70% or so of other councils in this country that base their rates on capital value. There's been talk of a rates review, and as far as I've paid attention to it, for at least the last 5 or 6 years. I keep the clippings. This is a thing near and dear to my heart because I'm one of the people that suffer from that inequality. I know you've been talking about having it next year, if I read the newspaper right. I sincerely hope that happens. I keep wondering why it's been postponed again and again. All right, I hope it's just bureaucratic inertia and not something else that doesn't get spoken about. Let me ask a simple question. Why do different residential properties pay different amounts of rates? Not because they receive different amounts of services, but because it's obviously some attempt to tie the rates to ability to pay. All right? Much like the logic of progressive income tax rates. All right? It has to be that. What else could it be? All right? However, property values are an imperfect measure of that. That's clear, but you've got them there. They're right in front of you. It's public knowledge. But how? It absolutely defies logic how you can assume that using land value is a fairer basis for doing that than capital value. When you buy a house, do you worry about what the land by itself is worth, or do you worry what the whole thing's going to cost you? Of course, you worry about what it's going to cost you. All right. Land value is not a fair way of doing it. If I'm missing something here, by the way, if there's some intrinsic logic to the land that I'm missing, please tell me at some point, because I've been pondering this for years and years, and I just can't see it. There's lots of inequality. There's lots of unfairness involved in this use of the land value, and many, many submissions make that point. All right. Clearly, the council in your documents recognize that there are people with somewhat bigger sections that are potentially subdividable are getting a raw deal from this. That you recognize, you've recognized that in some ways for many, many years, but you don't change it. There's no doubt about it. I'm one of those people, all right? I was interested to see many people submitting say, yeah, I've got a bigger property, but it's really not very subdividable because of the way the house is or the garage is or whatever, all right? All right? So, I mean, why are we emphasizing that? It's almost as if, there's something wrong with you. You haven't subdivided your 900 square meters. Why have fruit trees? Why grow vegetables? Why have a compost pile to get rid of the food waste in a useful fashion? There's more, though. If you take a look at the mapping on your beautiful website, the property and land values, it's beautiful. It's really fun to play around with, especially in an area you're familiar with. You will see that it's not just bigger sections that get the raw deal. Older houses, by definition, seem to have a much smaller difference between capital and land value, and in effect are being cheated, all right, just by virtue of having an older house. The difference between my land and my capital is a mere $35,000 on almost $1 million property. And I understand how they do the valuation. I challenged it once, rather foolishly, all right, and it didn't get anywhere, all right. But why they do that is a puzzle to me, All right, again and again and again, you see this difference if you're familiar with an area. I've got just 2 examples up there. First one is my house, 116, and my neighbor's house, 114. For most of the time I've been there, the last 40-odd years, the 2 houses were very much alike. 1950s stucco houses on about 900 plus square meters. Flat, rectangular, subdividable, all right? And they tended to have virtually the same valuation, both land and capital. However, a couple years ago, the folks that own the property next door stopped renting it out and took away the old house. That's an interesting experience to have happened to you. And built a big new house next door. Okay, now note, the valuations are the current valuations. The rates are the old present valuations rather than the new ones. All right, now we've got a $2 million house next to me on capital value and a land value of $930. Mine's $970 and $935, virtually the same. So what's going to happen? $2 million house going to pay about the same rates, actually slightly less than the less than $1 million house. All right, I can't believe my house is worth $1 million. You know, wow, you know, it's crazy. Actually, it's not worth it anymore. If you believe homes.co, it's below that already. Second example, if I might, on the second slide. I'm not sure how to do that. This is up the street from me. About 4 or 5 doors. This is a subdivided property, all right? You have 106 and 108. It used to be one property. 108 is the old house in the front. Total valuation, $660,000 a number of years ago, maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago. The back section was sold off. They built a new house there. That's got a capital value of $1.4 million. You know, land values similar. Indeed, the old house has a slightly larger land value than the new. Nope, both sections are the same size in the same place. Again, you could say these are just, you know, simple one-off examples. I have no doubt if I spent a few days looking at your website, I could find examples of this kind of thing all over the city. Okay, that's my point. It's unfair. All right, and hopefully this illustrates it, and it's not just because you haven't subdivided. You got an older house, the way they value property in this country, which I might add, I think is something ought to be examined much more carefully than has been. I can't understand. I've asked planning colleagues out at Massey that I work with, why are we so obsessed with the value of a piece of developed land as if it was bare? It's never going to be bare, or at least not for very long if they move the house away. All right, why are we worried about that? Anyway, that's my point. It is grossly unfair, and I hope you will move to do something about that in the near future. You'd have a lot less unhappy people. One further point, which I've made before to you folks. Clearly, local councils need a broader revenue base. All right, this is not a new thing for discussion. You know, there are all kinds of ideas out there, you know. Gasoline tax, the petrol tax in Auckland's an interesting one to look at, but there's other things. You could return the GST on rates, which is a tax on a tax, to the council's concern. You could allow councils to add a little bit more GST. You know, they do that in other countries, and that becomes a major revenue stream. You know, the point is, please join with other councils and lobby the government for change, because they're at least willing to look at change. Could I also ask, I'm a little worried about this Three Waters stuff and the nature call stuff. Before we got to the Three Waters stuff, looked like nature calls was going to cost the ratepayers a lot of money. You know, what happens if Three Waters doesn't come to pass, or if they change it in light of all the pressure that's put on them? You know, if the funding changes, are we still going to get a big rates increase on the basis of having to pay for some of that, or has that been taken care of? There's a little bit in your document about that, but it's not completely clear. Anyway, thank you for listening to me.
Look, thank you, Mr. Perry. It's been good, and thank you for your little PowerPoint presentation and examples. I'll open it up for any questions. No from my colleagues? All right. Look, thank you. And just, Mr. Perry, we probably agree with you about extra revenue streams, and some of the examples you've put forward are very apt. I mean, they are top of mind, and please tell our MP and our central government colleagues the same.
Absolutely.
Is there a question from? Oh, sorry, Councillor Barrett isn't coming through.
Sorry about that, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Perry, for the submission and speaking to it. An area that you didn't touch on is the sort of proportional distribution of rates between sort of different groupings of types of properties, and I'm thinking in particular residential in contrast to non-residential. And we face a unique situation this year in which one of those is on average going up and one of those on average is going down. And just wanted to know if you had a view around whether that's an issue, and if so, what some solutions might be.
I haven't looked at that in any serious way. I've been concerned, obviously, with the residential property because it affects me and many other people. Is it that the commercial properties are tending to go down, or?
Correct.
Why is that? Is the land value, is the way they do the valuation of those kind of properties different somehow than how they do residential properties? That they would be going down while the residential properties are going up massively? I mean, I can look into it, I can talk to my planning colleagues, but I don't have an answer for you on that.
That's all right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Right, thank you, Mr. Perry, appreciate it. Right, councillors, I'll just go back. Is Anise here or online? No, okay. All right, James Russell. Welcome. This is submission 122, councillors.
All right, good morning, Your Worship. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time and effort reading my submission and all the others. I know you've read it, so I won't repeat my submission. I will observe, though, having read all of the other submissions, it's certainly in line with the large volume of people submitting who are not happy with the 8% average rates increase. And as we've already heard, there's a lot of people not happy with the apportionment of how rates are calculated. But the vast majority of the submissions that I read were quite unhappy. No surprises with the cost of living crisis that we've currently got going on and over 6% inflation, that people don't want to keep paying another 8% increase in rates year on year, which was signalled last year in the 10-year plan, which I also came and submitted and gave a very similar submission about how I'd prefer you to spend less and therefore need to take less in rates. So the key things that I'm saying in my submission, first of all, here in Palmerston North, there are a large number of ratepayers who are on a pay freeze because of central government fiscal constraints. So if we're on a pay freeze, can I please advocate that this council perhaps copies that, whereas the current plan has a 2.03 million increase to the remuneration budget. I completely understand that the workers are facing increased costs and therefore they need to be paid more in order to keep up, but a lot of ratepayers here in this city are not in that boat. We are facing increased costs and have not been paid more in years to keep up with inflation or rising rates. The alternative to this is if we are going to go ahead with the 8% increase in rates and you are going to go with the 2.03 million increase in the remuneration budget, could you please do us a favour, write to central government and ask them to suspend the pay freeze on government employees, especially here in Palmerston North. That would perhaps be fair. Second thing, contributing to the cost of living crisis here in New Zealand is the criminal cost of houses. I know that is not entirely the fault of local government. Central government needs to shoulder a lot of the blame in that. Both major political parties need to shoulder almost all the blame for that, but the cost of living crisis is contributed to by the insane price of houses, which is insane especially given the amount of land that we have here in New Zealand. I know last year during the 10-year plan when zoning was being discussed, there were a lot of submissions about soil quality and farming land being used for housing. To be honest, there is no shortage of farming land here in New Zealand. Here in Palmerston North, there is an artificial shortage of housing land. If we were to ease up on the zoning restrictions and let housing be built, you would see the price of housing come down, and therefore 8% average increases in rates might be more tolerable because people aren't paying such huge mortgages and rent bills. I'm not the only person who submitted objecting to the amount of money that was spent in legal fees because of the immoral and illegal decision to ban Speak Up for Women using the Palmerston North Library. I think that is unconscionable that happened, and I know there is no method to dock wages of those who were responsible for that cost, but I wish that there was. I would like to advocate for the $100,000 of community relief efforts post-COVID-19 to not be spent. I don't think that's core council business. I am a big fan of cycleways, and I think we should have a lot more of them. I think Palmerston North should be one of the most cyclable cities in New Zealand, but I don't think we need to have an active transport behaviour change program accompanying that. Just build the cycleways, we will use them. Don't spend money advertising or trying to coach behaviour for Palmerston North residents. So all up in my proposal, I've suggested some methods to save $6.1 million of ratepayers' money, and I would also like to continue advocating for scrapping land use restrictions and let housing be built. And I'd also like to urge this council to oppose the Three Waters reforms. I don't think it's good for Palmerston North. The case has not been made by central government. And Palmerston North, I see, is also spending $41,000 educating the public on that. If the central government want to make that change, they can fund it. That's all. Thank you very much.
Good. Look, thank you, James. Are there any questions? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, James, for your submission. There's a lot in there, but I really appreciate the examples you've given on things that you do and don't support, because that's what is actually useful when it comes to us having our debate. So with your final comments around Three Waters, you've said that you want council to begin opposing it. I'm just wondering how much resource or money or time do you think we should spend opposing it in terms of a campaign or, the efforts to do that? What do you think would be adequate to put around that kind of issue?
I think that can be opposed within the current budget that Palmerston North City Council has. I think that's called council business, to oppose central government, local government reforms, so I don't think you need any extra money to oppose that campaign.
Okay, so do you then see that as something as simple as sending an email or having a conversation to
I'm aware
the
that there are a number of mayors who have grouped together. I believe Waimakariri and Selwyn councils are two examples that I can think of, and there are a number of mayors who have grouped together to oppose those reforms. You could join those campaigns. I don't think it needs to be costly, but...
Are you aware of the cost to join that campaign? There's a charge that they've put out for any council to join that campaign?
No, I'm not aware of that.
That's fine, thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks, James, for your submission. And as the Deputy Mayor said, very useful having specific examples of where you think savings should be targeted. I wanted to ask around your views that you've put forward around, accessing a lot more land for greenfield development. One of the kind of principles that we've probably had a bit drilled into us in terms of council is that more compact urban form means less pipes, less roads, and therefore less costs into future generations of ratepayers, and just wanted to know your views around kind of that aspect of the solution that you're putting forward.
Yes, well, the international examples are quite clear, and there's a lot of literature that's been written by the New Zealand Institute for Local Councils about land use restrictions. Overall, the cost of, when I first lived here in Palmerston North, I could buy a 4-bedroom house for $240,000 out in Ashurst. That was the first house I bought. Prices these days are upwards of $800,000, $900,000 here in Palmerston North. So yes, there is more cost that needs to be incurred for new development, but the overall cost of housing will be less overall. So you got to weigh them up. There might also be better methods to pass on or to fund new development, and I think perhaps that's an issue with central government. Has not been addressed by them, but there's been a lot of talk about that. So I think overall cost to ratepayers would be less if land use restrictions if restrictions were fewer, cost would be lowered overall. Price of land, despite the increased cost for pipes and roads and etc.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Right. Are there any other questions from council? No, nothing online. Okay. Look, thank you, James. Appreciate your submission, and it will be debated in the coming weeks. And thank you for giving us exact examples too, as the councillors have alluded to. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Right. We still have a couple of submitters that have not fronted. So we'll go online, because I know we have our colleagues from the Water Safety New Zealand are online, and we have Dan Girard, Rob Hewitt, and Karen Morney-Smith. So we'll get them up online. Right. So I'm not sure who's leading this. So either Rob or Dan, over to you.
Kia ora koutou katoa, ngā mihi nui kia koutou mō tō tautoko ki roto I tēnei puna wai. Ko wai au, ko ropata hiua tōku ingoa, ngō Ngāti Kahungunu au. Nō reira ka noho au ki o Tangaki, aka Ashurst. ka noho au kei reira. No reira, ko au te kai whakahaere mō tēnei hāpori haumaru wai o Aotearoa. Ka hoa atu te rākau ki te rangatira, Daniel, mō te whakamārama tēnei kaupapa. So my name's Rob Hewitt. I actually live in that Ashurst area. I grew up in Hawke's Bay, but migrated over the other side of the Ruahine, and I've lived in Ashurst and Palmerston North for the last 15 years. I work for Water Safety New Zealand as the Māori Kaihautu, and I work for the Whitewater Leaders Group, which is a water safety sector. And I'll now hand the rākau over, the talking stick, to our CEO, Daniel Girard. Kia ora.
Thank you, Rob.
Oh, sorry, Daniel, you're on mute.
Kia ora tātou. Obviously the first time I've been on one of these video conferences in this current day and age. Apologies. Thank you, Rob, very much. Kia ora. I'm Daniel Girard, Chief Executive with Water Safety New Zealand, and really sincerely thank the opportunity to be here with you today. Really would like to acknowledge the work that has gone in by the council staff around jointly developing this initiative, this pilot, iwi-led number of individuals involved around the Manawatu River assessment, tika o te awa Manawatu. Water Safety New Zealand has two really robust and clear outcomes that we feel we need to be working really, really closely with New Zealanders around behaviour change. For us, minimising risky behaviour is one of the key pillars to changing the behaviour of Kiwis and the way that they interact with water. We also feel we need to develop and grow safety skills so that our youngsters can develop a lifelong passion and love for the aquatic environment and grow and learn as they progress through their age and stage. We've also got fantastic partners out in the sector that are there to actually do the reducing of drowning and hospitalisations, the frontline rescue people, and they were there with you as a community over the summer period that was so tragic in the Manawatu. We know that as an organisation, we're based here in Wellington, we've got people around the country, but we need local solutions for local challenges, and to work collectively, in this case having local iwi, local government, the water safety sector, some central government input, volunteers and even businesses, it's the only way we can really start to address the challenges around assessing those risks within the Manawatu River. This summer was the worst, and it appears to be becoming worse. We're already halfway through the last couple of years' total number of drownings, and it really is following on from the summer that was, which we saw the worst in 40 years. So the four absolute tragedies that occurred within the Manawatu River is something that the local community has raised with us and has led to the development of this project. And we're here to ask for support around this wider initiative and how we as a community and wider whānau can work together. Appreciate that the four fatalities within 1 week within your river, it's not just about a number. This is a whānau member, this is somebody within your community. It has work colleagues, they have close friends and families. There's social well-being and physical impacts of these tragedies. There's also economic impact as well, and our partners at ACC estimate each drowning to be valued at $4 million. So with our average of the last 10 years at about 80 fatalities, that's $320 million a year that is spent on these absolute tragedies. So it's a partnership approach that we require, and working in with local councils is definitely one of the first steps forward. The pilot that I will hand back over to Rob to discuss in detail and answer some of the questions is a joint initiative. We have local iwi, Palmerston North City Council, Horizon Council and Water Safety New Zealand have all been working together with other organisations, the police for example, to really work out what is the way forward for you, a localised solution to a localised problem. There are other initiatives and I think exciting opportunities that have been developed and discussed during this investigation, and that is around the protocols associated with rahui. How do we formalise that? How do we actually inform people in a better way? Signage around rivers and fresh water has been a challenge around ownership. What's the story we're trying to tell by having that sign? Now, if somebody's driven an hour to get to a swimming hole, the last thing they're probably going to do is read a sign that says, it's actually a bit dangerous, I'm not going in. But we need to be reinforcing these messages at particular times of that journey. And the final piece is the ongoing education. We want to be able to work in with Palmerston North and the wider community to actually look at opportunities to grow and build educational chances, primarily for our kids, so that they are aware. That's it from me. I'd like to hand over to Rob around some of the detail. He's been very hands-on in this process, and again, I thank the council staff in particular who have been supporting us in these kōrero, and then we can open to questions.
Kia ora. Kia ora e te rangatira. Ngā mihi nui ki a koutou, ngā pautoko mano o tēnei whenua. There's a whakatauki that I would use, or a proverb, no te raurau, nāku te raurau, kia ora ai te iwi, which is with your skill base and our skill base, the iwi, the whānau, will be taken care of under the umbrella of health and wellbeing, which is a pillar, I understand, ki rotu te ao Māori, but also a pillar for the whānau sitting around the table for the Palmerston North City Council. We're looking at working collaboratively, as Daniel mentioned, but also we are running and talking to other councils, i.e. Waikato Hamilton City Council with Gavin Eons, and we also have a meeting with Andy Mannering coming up as well, and what that looks like for us. But because I live in Palmerston North, as my auntie would always say, make sure you work in your own backyard first before you go out and do anything else. You know, so this is why I believe that we can really take a good lead forward. We can lead by example in this space, and because we have the local government hui in July, then if we have a look at the amount of drownings that we've had over the summer in the rivers, comes to 9, and 4 of them were in our awa, Manawatu. So it's a real talking point for us at this local government hui in July, that we can actually show the other city councils who have a main river going through their town what we are doing and how we're leading in this space. And we can only do that if we work collectively. And that's what the whakatauki talks about, working collectively, knowing our strengths and knowing our weaknesses, so we can support each other to keep our whānau within our region of Manawatu, Palmerston North, healthy and safe. Kia ora. Are there any questions? I'll hand back over to you, Mayor.
Kia ora, thanks Rob, thank you Dan for your comments. I've got a couple, just before I go to my colleagues. And thank you for your initiative. I mean, I was pretty close to those drownings, and one thing that struck me was English was a second language in just about all of them, which was something that I think needs to be acknowledged too, because we've got a diverse multicultural community here. You talked about partners. Have Surf Life Saving New Zealand been sort of brought into the mix at all? We've had the local club talking to us about how they could possibly assist. I mean, I know the emphasis is on, for Surf Life Saving, is on coasts, but this is a river environment we're talking about.
Yes, so we have spoken to Surf Life Saving, and they have come up with some risk assessments. But we have also said to Surf Life Saving that this must be, at a national basis, that this must be a localised and a local initiative. So we have spoken to surf lifesaving clubs that were at those rescues and recoveries from Otaki down to Horowhenua over to Foxton. And
as well.
we believe that, and we believe that could be the answer. The answer lies within the region with the support from the national body.
Okay.
Yeah, I totally agree. And look, they are coastal experts. They are trained to work in coastal rivers, but it's either working with them to translate some of their skills to local partners that work around AWA or local canoe and kayak type clubs. There's a wider brief here, but surf lifesaving, they've got a massive challenge on their hands to start with the beach. When we can use their search and rescue skills, absolutely, they would always be included. So, they're absolutely part of the solution.
I'll allow a few more.
Sorry, and the other question that you mentioned, the non-English speaking, is that we are working very closely with the National English Language School to talk to them about what sort of signage or conversation can we have with their non-English or their English-speaking students that go to these places. So we've had several conversations with them, and for them it's more about pictorial conversations when they're in the classroom. So they are one of the partners in the space as well.
Infographics you're talking, Rob, sort of pictures.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, good. I'll
use that word, infographic.
I'll allow a few more questions because we do have a bit of gap and a bit of space, and this is quite a serious topic we're talking about. So, Councillor Dingwall.
Talofa lava, Rob, and thank you, Dan, for coming in to speaking to us today. I was just wondering, with the different partners that you've got involved with this pilot, do you know how much, resourcing you would need to sort of follow through on some of these projects, and how much you would be looking at PNCC contributing to this? Just as a ballpark, what are we looking at here in terms of resourcing?
Rob, have you, on the committee now, have you guys landed on the number for year one?
Yeah, so what we're looking at here is for year one is around about $25,000. We've already started conversations with the with Search and Rescue, who have come in with a grant of $10,000, and that's to start us off with our meetings. What is it that we want to do? How do we want to? And then also supporting the initial mana o te awa, or the assessment itself. So there'll be 4 assessments conducted in spaces that you identify as swimming holes or beaches. And I understand that there is a thought of maybe having another beach up and going by next summer. And we would look at maybe 4 or 5 swimming holes, do a risk assessment on those 3 or 4 risk assessments between now and season opening, i.e. November, and bring in our partners to write up a report, give to the Palmerston North City Council to say these are some of the issues, these may be some of the things that we need to watch out for before we actually open up for swimming holes.
Cool.
For the summer.
And just to support that, this initiative is really a combination of work that a number of people are already doing. It's the coordination of this work which is probably needing to be highlighted, that it's everybody coming together under the same kaupapa, and some of the outputs such as redeveloping signage, potentially having rescue equipment available in some of these locations. That's where the initial cost may be, but a lot of the work is being done already, so it's leveraging off that. So we would envisage coming out of this at the end of year one saying, wow, fantastic partnerships, worked really, really well together. How do we invest in this going forward? How does it get replicated around other parts of the country, around other parts of the river? So that's the initial thinking.
Wonderful. Thanks very much.
All right, and finally, Councillor Johnson online.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. And kia ora koutou to the water safety team, and thank you for your submission. I've got a couple of questions. I know that as part of the Welcoming Communities Advisory Group, that a subcommittee was set up. Are these one of the groups that you're talking about in your hui that you have been involved with?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, okay, awesome, just double checking. And then the other question is around the report that you've mentioned in your submission, that you'll be producing a report with recommendations for change. Will that report be coming to council, or could you ensure that a report of it does come to council?
Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely. You would be the initial reader of that document. It'll be for you. Absolutely.
Okay, awesome. And what's the timing? When are we expecting that we might be able to have that in our hands, as it were?
Well, we would look at if let's say, for instance, if we're looking at people gathering around the waterway in December, November, then we would like to have that report completed and have a fair assessment around about a month before that, so that we can make a decision on what we're going to do to keep the health and well-being of our people once they go into the water. If we have a look at the last fatalities, streamline was December, January. So we want to make sure that we've got this completed, or we've got some form of completion before December, January.
Okay, so we, in terms of our sort of budget processes, if we're looking for funding for the next financial year, which for us starts 1st of July and runs to 30 June, you would potentially be looking for funding within that financial year, would you?
Yes. As Daniel mentioned, we have already started doing a lot of the heavy lifting and the space. So now it's just a matter of just repacking everything up into a space, and then after moving into the next second half of the financial year is to do a re-evaluation of lessons learned from summer just gone.
Okay, so in other words, if we as council are looking at assisting with funding of this, then we need to have money in the next financial year, i.e. from July 1.
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you, everybody. Kia ora. That has exhausted those questions. I let that go because we have a gap. Councillors, we'll break for a short coffee break. We have our next submitter coming in at 10:10. So for the members of public in the gallery, there is a tea and coffee out there if you'd like one. Thank you. And to our submitters online, again, we thank you for your submission. And again, we'll be debating that, and I think the councillors have teased out what you're looking for. So we appreciate that. Thank you, councillors. We'll just adjourn for 10 minutes or 15 minutes, and then we'll be back in the chamber. Thank you. Kia ora tātou, welcome back. And to those online, we're back in the chamber. Right, we'll recommence our hearing session. And I welcome Emma Ochi to the table. Welcome, Emma. You're used to these submissions. So, councillors, it's submission number 266. And Emma, the floor is yours. We've got 10 minutes. We've read your submission, so you may want to summarise and then some questions.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Strange to be back here again. So I'm speaking today in a personal capacity. I'm no longer at the Palmerston North Community Services Council, and also I'm not representing the views of the Manawatu Toy Library, though that may have appeared on the written submission that's self-populated, and I didn't see that before I pressed submit. Though my opinions I'm presenting here have been informed by almost 10 years involvement with the voluntary and community sector in Palmerston North. Possibly bucking the trend of the submissions, I'm speaking in support of spending on council services and community services, particularly those which have social and environmental outcomes. I support the spending needed to keep council services functioning at current levels, and potentially in some areas where perhaps you think the service levels are not optimal, perhaps there needs to be more spending in certain areas. Particularly I'm thinking about support for council staff salaries. We know at this time it's challenging for employers, and particularly employers which might not be in a position to pay market rates for staff. So I think that putting the squeeze on any areas of budget which would result in staff cuts or freezes on hiring is not going to be good for the ability to provide services to the public, and not good for the council's reputation and being able to deliver what you need to do. Thinking about how we can, or how you can, attract skilled staff and importantly retain them. I have seen in working in the community sector high staff turnover across a number of teams in the council that I've been working alongside, and it's really hard to create relationships with staff that are regularly changing or not staying long in their roles. At the Toy Library, we've had 4 nominated contacts within the community development team over the last 3 years, and it's quite hard to be explaining what your service does, in our case the Toy Library, get the staff member to understand and be able to advocate for you, and then they're off and there's a new person to get to know. And I'm not just talking about the community development team. I know there's been staff turnover in a number of areas, so I just think that keeping budget in place to be able to support staff in doing their job and want to stay there and be retained is very important. Another example is a member of the public trying to call the staff, not the staff, well, any staff in the hotline, the 356-8199 number. In March, I've been calling that regularly, and more than 4 minutes wait. Regularly, more than 4 minutes waiting to speak to a staff member, to be transferred even to speak to somebody, which is quite a long time. I think 4 minutes. You'd have to be particularly persistent as a citizen of Palmerston North to be reporting a burst water pipe or graffiti or overflowing rubbish bins. And most people, I think, even well-meaning people who want to be active citizens in the city would probably give up. And those people are going to go away thinking council's not listening, council's not accessible, and grumbling to all their friends. So that's another example of where there needs to be, well, just an example of staffing being important to be able to connect with the city and to be able to be accessible and available for citizens. So that's that. The funding for social services and community organisations, obviously you know my background in that, so you won't be surprised, but I see that council support for social and cultural groups is a really significant way of providing social cohesion in the city, and that's an important part of the small city benefits, which is part of the council's vision. Even having support from council provides moral and psychological support to all the volunteers who are there doing work for the common good, to know that the council's providing funding and other support for those groups, and that goodwill's not to be underestimated. The other thing I've been thinking about, I know that you are all very interested in the most vulnerable people of our city, and I know that's important to you all. And I know that you will consider council's role in providing and supporting social services as part of your deliberations for the annual budget. We want Palmy to be a pleasant and welcoming space. I just noting that seems the situation of beggars, for want of a better word, seems to be becoming more persistent in Palmerston North. Last week I was in a cafe, well, I wasn't in a cafe, I was outside on a footpath enjoying a coffee and had someone approach me asking for change, which seems to be a step up from the more passive person sitting on Broadway with a placard beside them. So I don't want to see Palmerston North becoming a place where there's people, what's it called, begging effectively, going up, making such forward moves to ask for change, for money. That's not going to be good for business, that's not good for cafes, that's not good for attracting visitors, either short or long-term visitors to Palmerston North. That's not reputation we want to have. So the way I see that is funding for social services, and in my written submission I talked particularly about the line items. I was talking about the Community Development Small Grants Fund, increasing that, the Hancock House management contract, obviously, and the 100,000 for the community relief efforts for post-COVID support. So those items are there, but generally my comments pertain generally to support for social and community sector. That's enough of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. We've got Councillor Johnson online with a question.
Can you hear me?
Now we can, yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Sorry, there's a delay in unmuting myself, and that just makes it tricky to know whether you can hear me or not. Am I coming through?
Yes.
Okay. So Emma, thank you for your submission. I just had a question about the two line items that you mentioned. So you mentioned the funding for the Hancock Community House Management Fund, Programme 1574, that had reduced. So when I checked that in the draft annual budget, I saw that the proposal in the 10-year plan had been 63,000, and the proposal in the draft was 61,000. But my understanding is that there was a proposal for it to increase every year of the 10-year plan. Does the 61,000 maintain the status quo in terms of funding, or is that an actual reduction in real terms?
From memory, the 61,000 is the funding for this year, but in real terms that is decreasing, given that inflation is what it is, and the costs for all organisations, including council and including our community organisations. Yes, maintaining the status quo is effectively a decrease in funding in terms of purchasing power, and most of that contract money is spent on staffing. So with the pressures on staffing, it's particularly important to be able to provide to be a good employer effectively, and to be able to continue that with the work that Community Services Council is doing there at Hancock House. So yes, I would like that to be reinstated at least to the level that was proposed in the annual, the 10-year plan.
Yeah, I must admit I had not picked up that had been decreased, and so I'll put in a question to staff to just try and find out why that is. And presumably your same comments would apply to Programme 2023, where there was a proposal for 62,000 to the Small Grants Fund, but in the draft annual budget it's now only 61,000. Is that?
Yes.
Are those the two things you're referring to?
Well, that's right. It just seems like a kind of stealthy slither a bit off here and there. doesn't really seem fair. Is that the council flexing their muscles as the big player in these relationships, or is this, I don't know, natural desire for cutbacks where you can? In either way, it impacts on the community organisations who are all facing increased costs, and I really see that council has a really important role as a leader in this city to be supporting the work that goes on. Most of these are volunteer agencies or have large multiple hours of voluntary time going in, so you're getting great value for the work, the money that you're contributing here to all of these small organisations and agencies.
Okay, thank you for explaining that and for drawing our attention to it as well. And the other question I had was about the COVID Relief Fund. So you've said you support the extension of the COVID Relief Fund, and you think that support for community groups is going to be increasingly needed.
Yes.
Can you just give us an idea of why you think that? Give us a bit of a feel for the sector so that because obviously we've had other submissions saying that we should cut that fund. So it'd be good to hear why you think that fund is still needed or even increasingly needed.
I think perhaps increasingly needed might be the key. I think we've had 2 years of pandemic, and it was great that the council had foresight 2 years ago to start that fund. Perhaps in those early days, organisations had reserves, they had energy, they had, well, it was all new when you didn't know what was going to happen. But 2 years in, I believe that organisations have been stretched and are stressed, and the smaller ones, volunteers are tired, committees and boards are tired, perhaps the finances are not in the place they were 2 years ago, and definitely we're seeing from funders, all funders, a real tightening, I guess, of the rules for applying for funding. Many organisations, for example, the Kingdom Foundation, the COGS Fund, are really focusing their efforts on, I think one of them termed it life-sustaining services. So when you're a toy library, for example, you can hardly claim you're sustaining life in the way that perhaps housing organisations or food banks are. So it's a very tight environment for terms of the support we have had, and I would not want to lose some of these community organisations which have been around for decades in some cases, come this far through a pandemic. Maybe there's another couple of years to go, who knows, but to me it would be a shame to lose these organisations which have been such an important part of building the social cohesion, the community connection in the city, and have made it the city we have a really well-connected city where it's great to raise a family, where it's great to live. Support from council would allow some of these services to ride out this storm that we've been through. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Emma. That's exhausted the questions and the time. We appreciate your submission, and it will be taken into deliberations in a couple of weeks' time, so we appreciate you submitting. Thank you. Okay, is Mr. Bruce Duncan here? No. Anise, we've left messages for Anise. He's not here. Okay. Councillors, we'll just wait a couple of moments because Mr. Duncan is due about now. So we'll just take a 5-minute break, and we'll decide what we're doing at past. So enjoy your time. Kia ora. Welcome back, everybody. Look, we have our last submitter has not fronted, but we'll offer them another time if we have a slot. So, look, I will formally adjourn the meeting now, councillors around the table and also online, till 3:30 p.m. this afternoon, and we will be passing over to Councillor Hancock, who will be in the hot seat. Right. Okay, thank you, councillors, for joining us this morning, and submitters, and we will see you back online and in the chamber at 3:30 this afternoon.